Welcome back. Here we are again with another alteration. This is the United States Coast Guard tartan, and it's been brought, this kilt has been brought to me by a retired member. Again, it has sentimental value to him. We're going to alter it to fit. And you never know, right? Ex Semper Aliquid Novi. You never know what's going to come out of a project. If I pronounce that right. My Latin is terrible. Because once again, it's increasing, letting the kilt out to fit the customer's changed physique. And I've done that primarily in the aprons. I found, with the amount of material that I had to discover, had to find, I had to rob a pleat from either side, which has now given me, here we are, the inner apron is done and basted down, and everything's good and sewn, right, ready for a press. I've used the black canvas because that's what I have at the time. I'm going to be going down and buying some more interior canvas very shortly, and I think I'm going to choose a color other than black, because in this case I had to sew black thread on black cloth, because as we can see here, when the original maker thinned the back out, they did it dramatically. They took a lot out, because this kilt, instead of being pleated to the set, to every, to the stripe of the set from A to B to C, they've skipped. So they go from A to C. So they've basically saved themselves half of the work of sewing, because it's half the number of pleats it would have been otherwise. But it means it's got very deep pleats. So when they cut this back out, they did so in such an extreme fashion that I found that I chose to use black thread on black cloth, and that was just tearing my eyes right out of my head. I gotta tell you, I had to keep stopping and resting, because this panel, this outside layer of cloth is so very thin that I wasn't confident that I could do my herringbone stitch, which you should be able to see, just because there's still wax on the thread, because I was afraid that it was going to catch through on the outside, as careful as I could be. And I can see that it's actually happened a couple of times, although not many times as I'd worried about, just because, again, that's such a shallow layer of cloth. So far so good, but here's where things start to get, this is where the professionals get called in, because you can see what a dramatic piece of cloth was taken out with each pleat. So there's this to contend with. So as you can see here from this seam, I sewed on a patch, because here's our buttonhole. I had to sew on a patch so that this cloth would be suitably anchored to the canvas, and also so that when we do the lining, that we present a neat and professional appearance through the buttonhole turnback and the lining. But my concern now is that you can see, look how little space I've got for the canvas on this side. So you can barely fit it in there. It's going to be as much as I can do to join these two together with lacing. And after that, because there's simply no cloth here for me to sew it onto, I think I'm going to have to sew this. And there's going to be a part 2 of this video. We'll splice them together later on. I'm going to have to lace that in, so to speak, with my overhand stitch, and then stabilize this so that when I shape the front apron, that these pieces are stabilized to the canvas just by holding them in place, pinning them flat, and sewing them down. This is more surgery than tailoring, really. It's unfortunate, because I didn't see this until it was too late, quite frankly. I'm confident that I'm relatively confident that I can save the day, but it might turn out, it might simply be that this isn't strong enough, given what we've got to work with. And I might have to sew that buttonhole shut and then splice the remaining piece of canvas on top and finish the restoration of this kilt, the alteration of this kilt, so that it becomes of the earlier generation of kilts, which frankly is in keeping with the age of both the kilt maker and the owner of the kilt. The older generation of kilt, which only had a couple of straps on the right hand side. The other alternative, if I can't make that buttonhole work, again, sew this shut, carry on and shape it, and do what I did with that dancer's kilt a little while back, where the strap goes here and the buckle goes here, in a reversal of the usual process. Because we need, particularly on the mature figure, the mature male figure, we need the strength of the inner apron to take all of the tension as we buckle ourselves into the kilt. So yeah, I'm going to proceed with this, and a little bit later in chapter 2 of this video, you're going to see exactly how it turned out. Thank you. Here we are again, a day later from our previous episode with this Coast Guard kilt. And this is great. This is because as we finished filming, my apprentice, who was holding the camera, said, may I suggest something? And of course, I'm always happy to hear. So acting on his suggestion, I've patched this piece that was giving us so much concern. Because I remember I'd had to rob a pleat off of either side to get the extra length. And also, and it's something I've never seen in a kilt before, instead of one buttonhole in the left hip, it had two. One of the waist and one at the hip. I've never seen that on a kilt before. And there was a bit of damage, there was a bit of erosion in the buttonholes, which does occasionally occur. So again, another reason for rubbing out that pleat. But what I've done, as you can see, is I've provided a patch. And I've left the basting in place. So I've neatly sewn around it, and I've sewn it down so that it's integral. We're adding a little bit of thickness, but this will stabilize this whole portion so that I can now carry on. It's going to be a very, very deep apron pleat, but there's absolutely nothing I can do to avoid that, because again, these chunks being taken out, I can't have them really on the kilt. Somebody might comment, right? So it's going to be a very, very deep apron pleat, but there's no way to avoid that, unfortunately. But I smile a little bit because this kilt, again, it's the U.S. Coast Guard tartan. This fellow had served for many, many years, entire career in the Coast Guard. So he wears this out in grateful memory of his time with his branch of service. The piece that I've spliced in is I'm seeing him and matching him there, because I've spliced in a piece of my own former regiment's tartan. In fact, this is the one that I invented or created for their centenary in 2010, the Seaforth Centennial tartan. So we have a sort of brothers in arms thing going on there. So yeah, so from here, we pretty much carry on as usual. Again, admittedly with the extraordinarily deep pleat. But we'll carry on and see how this goes. Thank you.